The fluorescent lights of Seattle Children's Hospital buzzed overhead as Rebecca Martinez pushed through the heavy glass doors, her 5-year-old daughter, Emma's small hand, tucked firmly in hers. The October rain had followed them inside, droplets trailing across the polished linoleum floor. Emma's pink rain boots squeaked with each step, the only sound the child would make today, or any day. Rebecca's shoulders ached from the tension she'd been carrying for 3 years. 3 years since the diagnosis. 3 years since the doctors had confirmed what she'd feared in her heart: selective mutism, compounded by severe anxiety disorder. Emma hadn't spoken a single word since her 2nd birthday, the day Rebecca's ex-husband had walked out, slamming the door so hard it had rattled the picture frames on the wall. "Come on, sweetheart," Rebecca whispered, guiding Emma toward the elevator. They were early for their appointment with Dr. Chen, the speech therapist who'd been working with Emma twice a week for the past 6 months. The progress was minimal. A nod here, a smile there, but Rebecca clung to those small victories like a drowning woman clinging to driftwood. The elevator dinged, and they stepped inside. Emma pressed herself against Rebecca's leg, her dark eyes wide as 2 other people entered, a tired-looking nurse and an elderly man with a walker. Rebecca felt her daughter's grip tighten on her hand, the familiar anxiety radiating from the small body beside her. When they reached the 3rd floor, Rebecca checked her phone. They had 45 minutes before the appointment. Emma had barely eaten breakfast, pushing her cereal around the bowl with her spoon, while staring out the kitchen window at the rain-soaked streets of their Capitol Hill neighborhood. "How about we get a snack before we see Dr. Chen?" Rebecca suggested, knowing Emma wouldn't answer but hoping for some sign of agreement. The little girl looked up at her, then toward the hospital cafe across from the elevator bank. That was answer enough. The cafe was surprisingly busy for a Tuesday morning. The smell of fresh coffee and toasted bagels filled the air, mixing with the antiseptic scent that seemed to permeate every corner of the hospital. Rebecca guided Emma to a corner table near the window, away from the crowd. She'd learned that Emma did better with space, with the ability to observe rather than be observed. "Stay right here, okay? I'm just going to get us some muffins and juice," Rebecca said, making sure Emma could see her at all times. The little girl nodded, her straight black hair falling across her face as she pulled out the small notepad and crayons Rebecca always kept in her purse. Drawing was one of the few ways Emma communicated, her pictures often speaking volumes that her voice could not. As Rebecca stood in line, she watched her daughter from the corner of her eye. Emma was drawing what looked like a tree, her small hand moving carefully across the paper. A familiar ache settled in Rebecca's chest. What kind of mother couldn't get her own child to speak? The question haunted her during sleepless nights, whispered accusations that she tried to silence with logic, and the reassurances of therapists who insisted it wasn't her fault. The line moved slowly. Ahead of her, a woman in scrubs was ordering what seemed like coffee for an entire department. Rebecca shifted her weight from one foot to the other, her nurse's clogs. She worked night shifts at Virginia Mason Medical Center. Comfortable but worn from years of 12-hour shifts. She was so focused on the menu board, trying to remember if Emma preferred blueberry or banana muffins, that she didn't notice the commotion at first. But then she heard it, a sharp gasp from the direction of their table, followed by the crash of something hitting the floor. Rebecca's heart lurched. She abandoned her place in line and rushed back to Emma, her mind racing through possibilities. Had someone approached her? Had Emma knocked something over? Was she having a panic attack? But what she found froze her in place. Emma was standing beside the table, her notepad clutched to her chest, staring up at a man who was crouched at her level. He was tall. Rebecca could tell even with him kneeling, probably in his mid-30s, with dark hair that curled slightly at the ends and 2 days' worth of stubble shadowing his jaw. He wore jeans and a faded Seahawks sweatshirt, and his green eyes were kind, crinkled at the corners as he smiled at Emma. But it wasn't his appearance that made Rebecca's breath catch. It was his hands. He was signing. His movements were fluid, confident, graceful in a way that came only from years of practice. Rebecca had taken a basic sign language class after Emma's diagnosis, hoping it might be a breakthrough, but Emma had shown no interest. Watching this stranger's hands move, Rebecca could only catch fragments. Hello, beautiful, drawing. Emma's reaction was what truly stunned Rebecca. The little girl wasn't backing away or hiding behind the table. She wasn't exhibiting any of the anxiety-driven behaviors that defined her interactions with strangers. Instead, she was watching the man's hands with an intensity Rebecca hadn't seen in years. Her lips slightly parted, her breathing quick but not panicked. The man finished signing and pointed to Emma's drawing, then to himself, then made a gesture Rebecca didn't understand. Emma hesitated, glanced toward Rebecca, then slowly, so slowly Rebecca almost thought she imagined it, nodded. "I'm sorry." Rebecca finally found her voice, moving closer. "Is everything okay?" The man looked up, and when his eyes met Rebecca's, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition of a different kind. He stood, and Rebecca realized he was holding a small toy car, the source of the crash she'd heard. It must have fallen from his pocket. "Everything's fine," he said, his voice warm and slightly rough, like he hadn't used it much that morning. "I dropped this, and your daughter picked it up for me. I was just saying thank you." But Rebecca had seen the signing. That was more than just thank you. "You know sign language," she said, and it came out as an accusation rather than a question. "Yeah," he replied, slipping the toy car into his pocket. "My son is deaf. We're here for a follow-up after his cochlear implant surgery." The words hung in the air between them. Rebecca looked at Emma, who was still watching the man with that strange, intense focus. Then she looked back at him, at the tired lines around his eyes, the coffee stain on his sweatshirt sleeve, the hospital bracelet on his wrist that marked him as a parent in the same kind of limbo she lived in. Waiting rooms and appointments, hope and heartbreak. "I'm Rebecca," she said finally. "This is Emma." "Daniel," he responded, then paused. His eyes moved from Rebecca to Emma and back again, and Rebecca saw the moment understanding dawned. "She doesn't speak." Rebecca shook her head, the familiar weight of explanation settling on her shoulders. But before she could launch into the standard summary, selective mutism, therapy, progress is slow, Daniel did something that made her world tilt on its axis. He turned back to Emma and signed something, one word, slow and deliberate, his expression gentle. Rebecca didn't catch it. She'd been looking at Emma's face, watching as her daughter's eyes went wide, as color flooded her pale cheeks, as her small hand moved almost unconsciously to her throat. "What did you say?" Rebecca asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel looked at her, and there was something in his expression, understanding maybe, or compassion, or the recognition of someone who'd lived through his own version of hell. "I signed voice," he said quietly, "and then I told her that sometimes the most important things we say don't need words at all." Emma was trembling now, but not from fear. Rebecca knew her daughter's body language, like she knew her own heartbeat, and this was different. This was something breaking open, or maybe breaking through. "Emma?" Rebecca knelt beside her daughter, placing a gentle hand on her small shoulder. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" Emma didn't respond, didn't nod or shake her head. Instead, she did something she hadn't done in 3 years. She reached out to a stranger, this man, this Daniel, and touched his hand. And then, with movements so hesitant they were almost imperceptible, she signed back. Rebecca didn't understand the gestures, but Daniel did. She saw it in the way his expression softened, in the slight catch of his breath, in the careful way he responded with his hands. They were communicating. Her silent daughter was communicating with a complete stranger in a hospital cafe on a rainy Tuesday morning, and Rebecca felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a very long time: hope. The cafe seemed to fade away. The hum of conversation, the hiss of the espresso machine, the shuffle of feet on linoleum. until Rebecca's world narrowed to just this, her daughter's small hands forming shapes in the air, and Daniel's larger ones responding with a patience that made Rebecca's throat tight. "I'm sorry," Rebecca said again, though she wasn't entirely sure what she was apologizing for. "She doesn't usually... she's never..." "It's okay," Daniel interrupted gently. He was still crouched at Emma's level, his attention divided between the little girl and her mother. "I get it. Believe me, I get it." Emma signed something else, her movements gaining confidence. Daniel nodded and responded, then looked up at Rebecca with a small smile. "She wants to know about my son. She asked if he's nice." The casual translation, the normalcy of it, hit Rebecca like a wave. How many times had she wished for exactly this? Someone who could talk to Emma, someone who could reach past the walls her daughter had built around herself. "His name is Marcus," Daniel continued, signing as he spoke, including Emma in the conversation. "He's 7, and yes, he's very nice, though he'd probably tell you I'm the mean one because I make him eat vegetables." Was that a smile? Rebecca leaned forward, hardly daring to breathe. Yes, the corner of Emma's mouth was definitely turned up, a tiny but unmistakable smile. "I should get back in line," Rebecca said, reluctant to break whatever spell had been cast, but aware of the time ticking away. "We have an appointment with her therapist in half an hour." "Speech therapy?" Daniel asked, standing. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with the kind of build that suggested he worked with his hands. Rebecca noticed a smudge of paint on his forearm, dark blue against his tanned skin. "Yes, we've been coming twice a week for 6 months." Rebecca heard the defeat in her own voice and hated it. "It's slow going." Daniel nodded, understanding evident in his expression. Marcus's journey with hearing has been like that. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, sometimes 3 steps back. He paused, glancing at Emma, who was watching them both with those wide, dark eyes. "But we keep showing up. That's all we can do, right?" Rebecca tried to smile, but it felt watery, fragile. "Actually," Daniel said, and there was a hesitancy in his voice that hadn't been there before, "I know this is going to sound forward, and please feel free to say no, but Marcus is in the playroom on the pediatric floor. He's waiting for our appointment with his audiologist at 11. Would Emma maybe want to meet him? They could, I don't know, draw together or something?" Rebecca's first instinct was to refuse. She didn't know this man. He could be anyone. All the warnings she'd grown up with, all the caution she'd learned as a woman navigating the world alone, screamed at her to politely decline and walk away. But then she looked at Emma. Her daughter was signing something to Daniel, quick, urgent movements that Rebecca couldn't follow. Daniel's eyebrows rose and he signed back, asking a question. Emma nodded vigorously, more animation than Rebecca had seen from her in months. "She says yes," Daniel translated, his tone careful, leaving the decision entirely to Rebecca. "She'd like to meet Marcus, but only if you say it's okay." Rebecca crouched down beside Emma, taking both of her small hands in hers. "Sweetheart, do you really want to do this? We don't know." She stopped, choosing her words carefully. "Mr. Daniel is very nice, but we just met him." Emma pulled one hand free and pointed to Daniel's hospital bracelet, then to the pediatric floor directory on the nearby wall. Then she made the sign for safe, one of the few signs Rebecca had successfully learned, pressed into service during Emma's frequent anxiety episodes. "I have my hospital ID if that helps," Daniel offered, pulling a lanyard from his pocket. "I'm a contractor. I've been working on the renovation of the East Wing for the past 3 months. My background check is probably more thorough than most. Hospital security doesn't mess around." Rebecca examined the ID. "Daniel Morrison, Morrison & Son Construction." The photo matched, though in it he was clean-shaven and his hair was shorter. There was a phone number for the company listed at the bottom. "I'm not a creep," Daniel added, and there was something almost pleading in his voice. "I'm just a single dad trying to get through the day, same as you're a single mum doing the same thing. Marcus doesn't get a lot of opportunities to interact with other kids. His deafness makes it complicated, and most kids his age don't know sign language." If Emma could sign even a little, it would mean the world to him. Single dad. The words registered, along with the truth she saw in his eyes, the same exhaustion, the same desperate hope, the same barely contained fear that she carried with her every single day. "Okay," Rebecca heard herself say, "but I'm coming with you. And we still need to make our appointment with Dr. Chen." "Of course," Daniel said quickly. "The playroom is just upstairs. We'll have maybe 20 minutes before both our appointments. I promise, completely above board. There's always staff in the playroom, other parents, full visibility." They ended up skipping the snacks. Emma didn't seem to mind. She was too focused on Daniel's hands as he signed something that made her nod seriously. They rode the elevator to the 4th floor, Emma pressed against Rebecca's side, but watching Daniel with undisguised curiosity. The pediatric floor was brighter than the rest of the hospital, with murals of underwater scenes painted on the walls and colorful fish hanging from the ceiling. The playroom was visible through large windows, exactly as Daniel had described, full of parents, children, volunteers, and hospital staff. Inside, a boy sat at a small table near the window, building something elaborate with Legos. He had the same dark, curly hair as Daniel, though his was longer, touching his shoulders. He wore a blue t-shirt with a cartoon dinosaur on it, and Rebecca could see the cochlear implant processor attached to his ear, a small device that looked almost like a hearing aid. Daniel tapped the table to get Marcus's attention. The boy looked up, and his face transformed with a smile that was pure sunshine. He signed something rapid and enthusiastic, his hands flying through the air. "English, please," Daniel signed back, speaking simultaneously. "We have friends who don't sign." Marcus's eyes landed on Rebecca and Emma, and his expression became cautious, curious. Daniel signed an introduction, and Rebecca caught Emma's name, her own name, and something about drawing. Emma was hiding behind Rebecca's leg now, but she was watching Marcus with the same intensity she'd shown Daniel. Marcus signed something, then reached into a box beside the table and pulled out a large pad of paper and a set of markers. He pushed them across the table toward Emma, then signed and spoke simultaneously, his voice having the slight flatness of someone who couldn't hear their own speech clearly. "Do you like to draw?" Rebecca felt Emma's grip on her hand tighten. This was the moment. This was where her daughter would typically shut down, retreat into herself, become a statue that no amount of coaxing could animate. But Emma surprised her. She let go of Rebecca's hand, took 3 small steps forward, and picked up a marker. Red, her favorite color. She looked at Marcus, then at the paper, then back at Marcus, and she started to draw. Marcus watched for a moment, then picked up his own marker, green, and began adding to the drawing. Not taking over, not directing, just adding, collaborating. Rebecca felt Daniel's presence beside her, both of them standing back, giving the children space. She could smell his cologne, something woodsy and clean, and beneath that, the scent of sawdust and coffee. "Thank you," she whispered, unable to look away from Emma. "I don't know what you did, but thank you." "I didn't do anything," Daniel replied, his voice equally quiet. "Kids like Marcus and Emma, they speak the same language. They know what it's like to be different, to struggle to connect. Sometimes all they need is someone who understands." They stood in silence for a moment, watching their children. Marcus signed something, and Emma hesitantly signed back. A simple gesture, maybe hello or yes, Rebecca couldn't tell. But Marcus understood, and he grinned, and Emma smiled, a real, genuine smile that lit up her entire face. "How long has Marcus been deaf?" Rebecca asked. "Born deaf," Daniel said. "We didn't know until he was about 6 months old. His mom—" He paused, and Rebecca saw his jaw tighten. "His mom left when he was 2. Said she couldn't handle it, couldn't handle him, as if there was something wrong with him that needed to be handled." The bitterness in his voice was familiar. Rebecca heard echoes of her own anger at her ex-husband, who'd called Emma's silence attention-seeking and your fault for babying her. "I'm sorry," Rebecca said. "Don't be. We're better off without her." Daniel was still watching Marcus, but Rebecca could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. He got the cochlear implant 6 months ago. The surgery was last week. We're still figuring it all out. Activation appointments, therapy, learning how to hear when you've never heard before. It's overwhelming, Rebecca finished. 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. Exactly. Daniel turned to look at her then. And up close, Rebecca could see flecks of gold in his green eyes, could see the fine lines that spoke of long nights and hard-won smiles. How long has Emma been silent? 3 years, since she was 2. Rebecca's chest tightened with the familiar grief. Selective mutism, they call it. Anxiety disorder. She can speak, physically. She just doesn't, won't, can't. She shook her head. I don't even know which word is right anymore. All of them, probably, Daniel said. I've learned that with Marcus. There's what the doctors say, what we observe, and what our kids are actually experiencing, and those 3 things don't always line up neatly. Emma and Marcus were fully absorbed in their drawing now. It looked like a garden, Rebecca thought, with flowers and trees and what might be a house. Emma was adding butterflies, tiny red wings that seemed to dance across the page. She's really talented, Daniel observed. It's her voice, Rebecca said. Since she stopped speaking, she's been drawing. Everything she can't say, she puts on paper. Marcus does the same thing in a way. Before he learned sign language, before we understood what was happening, he'd just build things. Lego towers, block castles, anything he could stack and create. His occupational therapist said it was his way of communicating. Look, I can make order out of chaos. I can create something meaningful. They fell into comfortable silence again. 2 parents bound by the unique challenges of their children, by the weight of responsibility and the fierce, protective love that never dimmed, no matter how hard the days got. Rebecca checked her phone. We need to go soon. Dr. Chen doesn't like it when we're late. How's the therapy going, really? Rebecca considered lying, offering the optimistic spin she usually gave to well-meaning relatives and acquaintances. But something about Daniel's presence, about the way he'd shared his own struggles without sugarcoating them, made her want to be honest. It's not, she admitted. 6 months, and Emma hasn't said a single word to Dr. Chen. She won't even sign, won't use pictures, won't engage at all. At home she'll nod, shake her head, use her notepad. But in therapy, nothing. It's like she shuts down completely. Anxiety. Off the charts. Dr. Chen thinks it's the pressure, the expectation of progress. Every session is a reminder that she's different, that she should be speaking and isn't. It becomes a self-fulfilling cycle. Anxiety prevents speech. Lack of speech increases anxiety. Have you tried anything else? Art therapy? Play therapy? We tried play therapy for a year. Some improvement in her anxiety levels, but no speech. Art therapy is next on the list, but the wait list is 6 months long. And Rebecca's voice cracked, and she stopped, pressing her lips together hard. Daniel's hand landed on her shoulder, warm and solid. Hey, you're doing your best. Anyone can see that. My best doesn't feel like enough. The words tumbled out before Rebecca could stop them. I'm a nurse. I'm supposed to know how to help people, how to fix things, but I can't fix my own daughter. She's not broken, Daniel said firmly. Marcus isn't broken. They're just finding their own way, on their own timeline. Our job isn't to fix them. It's to give them the tools and the space and the support to figure it out themselves. Rebecca wiped at her eyes, quickly embarrassed. Sorry, I don't usually fall apart in hospital playrooms with complete strangers. We're not complete strangers anymore, Daniel said with a small smile. We're parents in the trenches together, and for what it's worth, you're allowed to fall apart sometimes. I do it at least twice a week. A laugh escaped Rebecca, watery but genuine. Only twice? Okay, maybe 3 times. 4 during bad weeks. They stood there, parents united in exhaustion and hope, watching their children create something beautiful together on a piece of paper. Marcus signed something to Emma, who looked up at Rebecca questioningly. Daniel translated, He wants to know if she can come back tomorrow. Rebecca's heart clenched. Tomorrow. They weren't scheduled back at the hospital until next week. But Emma was looking at her with those wide, hopeful eyes, and how could she possibly say no? "I don't know, sweetheart," she started. "I could bring Marcus to the cafe," Daniel said quickly. "Same time tomorrow. My work hours are flexible. One of the advantages of running your own business. We could, I don't know, make it a regular thing. If Emma's interested in learning sign language, Marcus would be thrilled to have someone to practice with." It was a terrible idea. Rebecca knew it was a terrible idea. She didn't know this man, not really. One kind gesture didn't mean anything. People disappointed you. They left. They gave up when things got hard. But Emma was signing something urgent and pleading to Marcus, who was nodding enthusiastically. And when Rebecca looked at her daughter's face, she saw something that made the decision for her. Joy. "Okay," Rebecca said. "Same time tomorrow. The cafe." Emma's smile could have powered the entire hospital. Rebecca didn't sleep that night. She lay in her small bedroom in their Capitol Hill apartment, listening to the rain drum against the windows and the occasional wail of sirens from the street below. Emma was asleep in the next room. Rebecca had checked 3 times, but Rebecca's mind wouldn't stop churning. "Yes, sweetheart," Rebecca said, her throat tight. "We're going to see Marcus today." Emma's smile was radiant. They arrived at the hospital cafe 15 minutes early. Rebecca ordered hot chocolate for Emma and coffee for herself, choosing a table with a clear view of the entrance. Emma clutched her notepad, her leg bouncing with nervous energy, excited nervous, not anxious nervous. Rebecca had learned to read the difference. Daniel and Marcus arrived exactly on time. Marcus bounded in with the enthusiasm of a typical 7-year-old, his cochlear implant processor visible against his dark hair. He was wearing a different dinosaur shirt, apparently a theme, and carrying a large Lego set box. "I hope this is okay," Daniel said as they approached the table. Marcus was so excited, he insisted on bringing something to share. Emma's eyes lit up at the sight of the Legos. Marcus set the box on the table and signed something to Emma, speaking simultaneously. "Do you want to build?" Emma nodded, and just like that, they were absorbed in construction, dumping Lego pieces onto the table and sorting them by color. Daniel slid into the seat across from Rebecca. Up close, in better light, Rebecca noticed things she'd missed yesterday. A small scar on his chin, the calluses on his hands, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. "You look tired," he observed. "Single mom of a special needs kid. Tired is my default state." Rebecca sipped her coffee. "You? Contractor and single dad of a deaf kid. I think tired is where we live." They shared a smile, that instant understanding passing between them again. "I hope you don't mind," Rebecca said, "but I looked up your company last night." Daniel's eyebrows rose. "Due diligence, smart, and you're the real deal. Also, I read the article from 3 years ago." Something shifted in Daniel's expression, a guardedness that hadn't been there before. That was, the reporter wanted a feel-good story. "I'm not a hero. I'm just a dad trying to do right by his kid." "That's exactly what makes it heroic," Rebecca said quietly. They fell silent, watching their children. Marcus was showing Emma how to attach pieces, their hands working together, building something neither could create alone. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel said after a moment. "Sure." "Why did Emma's father leave?" Rebecca stiffened. It was a personal question, maybe too personal for someone she'd known less than 24 hours. But there was no judgment in Daniel's tone, only curiosity and understanding. "He said he couldn't handle it," Rebecca said finally. "Emma stopped talking right around the time things got really bad between us. There was a lot of yelling, a lot of fighting, and then one day he just left. Told me Emma's silence was my fault, that I'd coddled her too much, made her weak." She laughed, but it was bitter, as if a 2-year-old could be weak, as if choosing silence wasn't its own kind of strength. "He was wrong," Daniel said firmly, "and he's an idiot for walking away." Marcus's mother said he was defective. Those were her exact words, Defective. Rebecca heard the barely controlled anger in Daniel's voice. Said she didn't sign up to raise a broken kid. And I told her she was the only broken thing in our house and she could leave. So she did. I'm sorry. Don't be. Best decision she ever made, leaving us. Marcus deserves better than someone who sees him as less than perfect. Emma too, Rebecca said. Though some days I wonder if I'm enough, if I'm giving her what she needs. You're here, Daniel pointed out. You show up, you keep trying, you don't give up. That's not just enough. That's everything. Emma signed something to Marcus, who responded enthusiastically. They both turned to look at their parents, matching hopeful expressions on their faces. Marcus wants to know if we can all have lunch together after our appointments, Daniel translated. He also wants to know if Emma can come to the Deaf Community Center with us on Saturday. They're having a family event. Games, food, sign language activities for kids. Rebecca's first instinct was to say no. It was too fast, too much, too overwhelming. But Emma was looking at her with those wide, pleading eyes, and Rebecca remembered the joy on her daughter's face yesterday, the engagement during therapy, the light that had been missing for so long. I don't know much sign language, Rebecca said. I'd be lost. I'd teach you, Daniel offered. And there'll be interpreters, lots of hearing parents there, learning alongside their deaf kids. It's not intimidating, I promise. It's actually pretty great. A whole community of people who understand what it's like to communicate differently. Emma tugged on Rebecca's sleeve, then made a sign. Please, one of the few Rebecca had successfully learned and used regularly. Okay, Rebecca heard herself say. Lunch today, and we'll try Saturday. Emma's smile could have lit the entire city. The appointments went better than Rebecca could have hoped. Doctor Chen was amazed at Emma's continued engagement, especially when she tried to use signs to express her feelings about different pictures. Whatever you're doing differently, keep doing it, Dr. Chen had said. This is real progress. They met Daniel and Marcus afterward at a small diner 3 blocks from the hospital, the kind of place with worn vinyl booths and a menu that hadn't changed since the 1990s. Marcus ordered pancakes with far too much syrup, and Emma ordered the same, watching him with admiration. While the kids ate and drew on the paper placemats the waitress had provided, Daniel and Rebecca talked, really talked, about the challenges of single parenthood, about the guilt and the exhaustion and the moments of unexpected joy, about their jobs, Rebecca's night shifts that left her drained, Daniel's construction projects that sometimes kept him up until midnight doing paperwork, about their dreams for their children, the futures they hope to build. I want Emma to find her voice, Rebecca said, however that looks, whether it's speaking or signing or drawing or whatever way she chooses to communicate. I just want her to feel heard. Marcus already has his voice, Daniel said, watching his son. Sign language, speech with the implant, writing, he uses all of it. But what I want for him is connection. I want him to know he's not alone, that there are people who understand him, who will meet him where he is. That's what Emma needs too, Rebecca realized. Connection, not fixing, just belonging. Maybe that's what we all need, Daniel said. And when their eyes met, Rebecca felt something shift in her chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. Saturday arrived wrapped in clear blue sky, a rare October gift in Seattle. The Deaf Community Center was in the Fremont neighborhood, a renovated warehouse with large windows and colorful murals on the walls. Inside, it was chaos in the best way. Children running, parents laughing, hands flying through the air in animated conversation. Emma held tight to Rebecca's hand at first, overwhelmed by the noise and activity. But then Marcus appeared, signing an enthusiastic greeting, and pulled Emma toward a group of kids playing a signing game. Rebecca watched her daughter hesitate, look back for permission, then take a deep breath and join in. She'll be fine, Daniel said, appearing at Rebecca's elbow. The kids here are incredible. They're patient, inclusive. They know what it's like to feel different, Over the next 3 hours, Rebecca watched her daughter transform. Emma was still quiet, still Emma, but she was engaged in a way Rebecca had never seen. She played games, learned signs, even laughed, silent laughter, but laughter nonetheless, when Marcus made a funny face. Daniel stayed close to Rebecca, translating, explaining, introducing her to other parents. By the end of the afternoon, Rebecca's hands ached from practicing signs, but her heart felt lighter than it had in years. "Thank you," she told Daniel as they walked to their cars, Emma and Marcus trailing behind, still signing to each other. "For this, for everything." "Thank me?" Daniel looked genuinely confused. "Rebecca, you've given Marcus something I couldn't, a friend who understands what it's like to communicate differently. You've given me—" He paused, searching for words. "You've reminded me that I'm not alone in this." "You're not," Rebecca said softly. "None of us are." They stood in the parking lot as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Emma and Marcus were showing each other something on Marcus's tablet, their heads bent together. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel said. "Of course." "Would you want to do this again? Not just the kids, but us. Dinner, maybe. A real conversation without medical appointments looming." Rebecca's heart stuttered. It had been 3 years since her divorce, 3 years of putting everything into Emma, into survival. The thought of opening herself up to someone new was terrifying. But when she looked at Daniel, really looked at him, she didn't see danger or risk. She saw a man who'd shown her daughter kindness when he didn't have to, who understood the weight of single parenthood, who'd built bridges instead of walls. "I'd like that," she said. "Yeah? Yeah." Daniel's smile was worth every moment of fear. "How about Tuesday? There's this Italian place in Capitol Hill that has great lasagna and a kids' menu Marcus actually likes." Tuesday works. They exchanged phone numbers, making plans while Emma and Marcus protested having to separate. Finally, with promises of seeing each other again soon, they parted ways. In the car, Emma was quiet, but it was a peaceful quiet, not an anxious one. She pulled out her notepad and drew another picture. 4 stick figures this time, 2 tall and 2 small, all holding hands. Above them, she'd written one word in careful letters: family. Rebecca's eyes burned with tears. "Not quite yet, sweetheart," she said gently, "but maybe someday." Emma looked up, and in her dark eyes, Rebecca saw understanding beyond her years. Then her daughter did something that made Rebecca's world stop. Emma put her hand over her heart, the sign for love, and pointed to Rebecca. It wasn't words. It might never be words, but it was voice, clear and strong and unmistakable. "I love you too, baby," Rebecca whispered. "So much." Le Duzel. As they drove home through the Seattle streets, past the Space Needle glowing against the twilight sky, Rebecca thought about silence and sound, about the words we speak and the ones we don't, about the unexpected ways life builds bridges between broken hearts. She thought about a single dad in a hospital cafe who'd seen her daughter not as silent or broken or less than, but as someone with her own language, her own voice, her own way of being heard. And she thought about tomorrow, and Tuesday, and all the tomorrows after that, not fixed or perfect, but filled with possibility, connection, and the quiet strength of those who'd learned to communicate in the spaces between words. Emma fell asleep on the drive home, her notepad clutched to her chest, a small smile on her face. And Rebecca drove through the rain-washed streets, her daughter's drawing of their new family tucked safely in her purse, and felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in 3 long years. Not just hope, certainty that they were going to be okay. Different than she'd imagined, speaking languages she was still learning, but okay, better than okay. They were going to be heard, all of them, in whatever voice they chose.